one of the things King Castan will not be addressing tonight is the recent series of blunders that the news has been wrought with recently. This government has the slimmest of conservative majorities, and the Tories are facing backlash recently over their being seen to capitalize on the crisis, particularly shootings for political purposes. I'm told the King read the draft speech from the government, because as you know, the government writes the speech most years, peppered with its particular agenda depending on which party is in power. But this year King Castan sent the speech back and said to talk more about addressing homelessness than the original draft accounted for, is said, with more compassion, and so the government did. They rewrote it. It's still a Tory speech, and you know that this might be aimed, tacitly at helping the Tories as in most years, but it might be a calculated move on the part of the Prime Minister, because she might use the King's recent speech on homelessness and caring for our communities as political cover to try to win more votes. This is an unusual state opening, more like a reopening after being prorogued by the King at the start of the summer. So it's unusual to have the government be reconvened so close to the elections, but we live in unusual times. The King usually deputizes one of the royal family to stand in for him at the state opening official, but this special session in reconvention, I think the general feeling could be that the King felt this reopening deserved his special attention.
Thank you very much, Liza Weld, but we are going to have to interrupt you, as we are outside the Parliament building in Seattle for our coverage of the reconvention of Parliament. And the King's throne speech, with all of the pomp and ceremony, although toned down for the reopened Parliament essentially being frozen, now reopened after the speech, where the King will address his ministers and representatives of the nation and outline his principal operations and deliver the government agenda for the legislative session. I think, yes, the King is ready now, and is about to make his way to the throne at the head of the room in the Red Chamber. Those watching at home will see, there he is, the King of Cascadia, resplendent in his ceremonial robes, ascends to the throne. We see him there, surveying the chamber with a warm smile. There's the nod, he's ready, and so are we. Let's listen in.
Mr. Speaker, the King commands this Honourable House to attend His Majesty immediately in the House of Peers.
My lords and members of the House of Commons, esteemed members of this Parliament of Cascadia, esteemed guests and my fellow Cascadians. As I sit before you today, I am filled with a deep sense of pride and gratitude to be the king of this great nation. It is an honor to address you upon this occasion as we gather to reconvene and continue this year of governance and progress. As we gather together tonight in this hallowed chamber, we do so with a sense of hope and optimism for the future. We are a nation built on the principles of social justice, equality, equity, and fairness. And yet, I'm reminded that there is still much more work that needs to be done. As your king, I am committed to addressing the pressing issues that affect our great nation. And so I want to speak directly to the challenges that we face. Specifically, I want to address the issue of homelessness. My dear members of Parliament, I sit before you today as a monarch concerned about this most pressing issue, which has been at the forefront of our collective conscience for far too long. Homelessness is a crisis that, as your monarch, it is my duty to acknowledge and address the suffering of those who lack a roof over their heads, and to pledge my commitment to finding a solution. We have made progress in recent years, but the reality remains that many among us still face the daily struggles of living without a home, the same barriers of entry and of access to the government services, supports, and assistances that they require and need to survive and thrive in this society, as well as facing the stigmas, prejudices, and indignities that they suffer and do not have to every day from our society at large, too apathetic and too distracted to understand. The statistics are stark. Thousands of Cascadians sleep on our streets, in our parks, and in our shelters every night. 1,500 people, that is 1,500 people, each year in this city of Seattle alone, perish and die during the winter months due to exposure to the elements because they could not get to a heating center, a warming station, or a homeless shelter bed in time to save their lives. Those are 1,500 deaths that are easily preventable and should not occur. And those are 1,500 deaths that this year my government will work tirelessly, as hard as it can, and harder to prevent. It is a stark reminder of the social and economic disparities that threaten the very fabric of our society. That fabric is in danger of being torn at the seams if we let it. For the Seattle and the Cascadia experienced by Jeff Bezos is very different from the Seattle and the Cascadia experienced by the man who sleeps at the bus stop. And yet, these two worlds, these two Cascadias, overlap with one another and occupy the same space. That is amazing to me. As a society, we are capable of greatness, and we have achieved wonders in science, technology, and innovation. We have built thriving cities, harnessed renewable energies, protected our natural resources, and preserved our natural wonders. But we have also failed to ensure that every one of our citizens has a safe and secure place to call his home. The economy is oft talked about in political circles, especially during years of elections. But I ask you, my parliament and my government, what of our moral economy? This is not just a moral imperative. This is a practical necessity and a duty. Homelessness is not just a matter of individual circumstance, but it is a systemic issue that affects us all, for it could be any one of us. One bad day, one bad week, one series of misfortunate events, one layoff, one breakup, and we are on the streets ourselves. We must never take our homes for granted, and we must never abandon those who have lost their homes or who have never had one. When we allow people to live without dignity and security, we compromise the very foundations of our community. Recently, I was invited into the home of a very dear friend of mine, and he is temporarily living in a tent. He said it's not much. I said, I'm honored to receive the invitation. He said, you shouldn't be. It's just a tent. On the contrary, I said, it is your home. And to receive invitation into anyone's home is, for the monarch, an honor. As your king, I pledge to work tirelessly with you, the members of my government and my parliament, and my government ministers, to address this crisis on behalf of all of our homeless residents who cannot be here to speak to you tonight, and those who are not here to fight this battle with us. And it is a battle that must be fought. One that does not have political factions, but indeed is a transcendent political battle, a battle that transcends all politics, a battle that affects us all. It is a battle in common cause for humanity itself. It is a battle that God and the gods above sanction us to fight together as generals and as soldiers in. And it is a fight that we will fight well and ably. My government will invest in affordable housing initiatives, increase funding for social services, and collaborate with local governments to provide more shelter options. But I do not come to you today only as a leader. I come as a Cascadian, deeply concerned about the well-being of my fellow Cascadians. I know that many among us are struggling to make ends meet, working multiple jobs just to keep a roof over their heads. I know that many others are struggling with mental health issues, addictions, or traumas that have left them without the stability that they need. Each time I am in their very excellent company, I am always humbled. There is great dignity to be found in the poorest among us. They are great and giant souls, walking around in shoes with the soles all worn out. Once, I was outside Westlake Station in Seattle, where I witnessed a woman, I'm not sure where she was from, throwing pennies at a homeless mother in front of her daughter. She was sitting at the station, holding a sign that says, "We are hungry and anything helps. God bless." This woman told her to get off her lazy ass and get a job, and threw 2 pennies at her from her purse. "Just my 2 cents," she said. "Why don't you stop spending all of our money on drugs?" she said, and threw 2 more pennies at her. "Just my 2 cents," she said. "If you're homeless, it is your fault. You should have some self-respect and decency, and get up and do something about it." "Just my 2 cents," she said, as she threw 2 more pennies at her. This woman took that abuse with dignity, with her head held high, and said not a word in response, while her daughter searched her mother's eyes, looked at the woman throwing pennies at her own mother, and I was appalled that this woman who was throwing them was content to let that daughter see her mother be humiliated in front of her own 2 eyes, and have that image forever seared into her memory. It made me physically sick. I will keep private what I said to the woman throwing the pennies, but you can be sure that I addressed her on behalf of us all. And I don't think that anyone here, or anyone with a soul anywhere in Cascadia or elsewhere, would disagree with what I had to say. To those who are currently experiencing homelessness, I want you to know that you are not forgotten. You are not invisible. You are seen, you are heard, and you are valued, both as members of our community and as our neighbors, family, and friends. And you are loved, in this moment, perhaps tonight, by no one more than me. We will do everything in our power to support you and your journey towards stability, restoration, self-sufficiency, and reestablishment. To those who are able to offer support, whether through volunteering at local shelters or donating to organizations that provide essential services, such as Angeline's Room and Angeline's Day Room in downtown Seattle through the Young Women's Christian Association, where they run a daycare for homeless mothers to send their children to, and during the winter months, run a shelter for homeless women and their children. They also offer pre-K programs and even kindergarten classes to make sure that our homeless youth, those who are growing up as children during these difficult and trying times, can have just as much as the wealthiest member of our society and his family can have the greatest and best start. Every effort counts, every dollar matters, and every kind word spoken can be the difference between hope and despair. Kindness can be the difference between life and death itself. And as we embark on this great journey, this great endeavor together, let us remember that homelessness is not just an economic issue. It is a humanitarian crisis, and it requires our compassion, our empathy, a collective sense of duty, and collective action. Let us now work together to build a society where every Cascadian can say with pride, now, at length, and at long wait, I have a home. Let us strive for a future where none must ever have to choose between basic necessities like food and shelter. A future where none go hungry. Let us create a world where every individual can live with dignity and respect. For those it affects, homelessness is a scourge on our society, its own personal hell, and it is a problem that requires immediate attention, and it's not received it in the past. Indeed, it's not received the due diligence that it deserves, as the government has mismanaged its homeless funds and its homeless agendas. As a Commonwealth, we have a responsibility to ensure that every citizen has access to basic human rights, which includes a roofed head. That is why I'm proud to announce and glad to say that my government will be launching a comprehensive plan to address homelessness in Cascadia. This plan will include increasing funding for affordable housing initiatives, expanding mental health services, and providing support for those who are struggling to get back on their feet. We will work closely with local governments, nonprofit organizations, and private sector partners to ensure that our efforts are effective and targeted. But homelessness is not the only issue that requires our attention. We must also address the rising cost of living in Cascadia. Inflation is a concern for many families and individuals who are struggling to make ends meet. As your king, I am committed to finding ways to reduce the cost of living without sacrificing our commitment to social justice and equality, both here and around the world. My government will work to reduce regulatory barriers that stifle innovation and entrepreneurship. My government will work to reduce regulatory barriers that stifle innovation and entrepreneurship. My government will encourage responsible fiscal management and sustainable economic growth. And my government will continue to invest in our own education system so that our young people, and in particular our young homeless people, can be equipped with the skills, knowledges, tools, and training that they need to succeed in the 21st century, as well as the degrees that they deserve. The only barrier to a degree should be your academic performance, not your income or how big your bank account is. We cannot do this alone. We must work together as a government, as a community, and as individuals, and we must recognize that we are all in this together, that our collective success depends, vitally depends, upon our ability to support and love and care for one another. We will not leave anyone behind. Let us come together now, today, for this great endeavor with a sense of purpose, pride, and determination. Let us work together towards a future where every Cascadian has access to affordable housing, quality health care, great job opportunities. Let us build a nation that is just, equitable, and prosperous for all. Thank you for your attention, my dear parliamentarians. May our collective efforts bring solace to those who need it most. And may God and the gods above forever keep, bless, and continue to bless all creatures, great and small, our state and our nation. May we be guided by them in the nation's van, forever preaching love and truth to the world by the principles of compassion, kindness, and love. Therefore, I hereby summon you all to this noble pursuit and declare reconvened and open this Parliament of Cascadia.